discussion with Yoga Explained. Last time we spoke about how the soul, being a ray of spirit, came down from the one eternal Father, must return the same way. We must step by step return to the infinite source of which we are raised. We must reascend once more to Him. The important thing to remember is that the key points in accomplishing that is the practice of yoga, which gives us union with the one eternal Father eventually. And in performing that yoga, once more we will not be separated from Him. The greatest sin is to feel that we are apart from God. And if we feel that way, there's nothing but oblivion in the end. But if we feel one with His love, then there is life eternal. So it is up to us to make the choice and then carry it through until we are sure, beyond doubt, of our oneness with the eternal Father. And so, with a restless mind, running hither and yon, it's impossible to feel the still, subtle, spiritual presence of God within. That's why yoga is so important. Yoga will give us that tranquility of the mind so necessary to once more know God. When you are not practicing yoga, you can still be with your Father if you will take Him with you in every action. The great Larry Marshall practiced Kriya Yoga for 12 consecutive years at 12 hours a day. And when he was taking care of his family, he had God in the fringe of his consciousness. So there's no excuse for us practicing perhaps a couple hours a day, and then when we are not practicing our meditations, we can feel God in the fringe of our consciousness. There's no reason why we cannot do that. If we will do that, we too can know our oneness with God. There'll be no separation between us, as Larry Marshall knew, although, of course, he was and is a great light of the great omniscience of God. Still, we all are the same in that omniscience. So let us realize that. The goal of life is to unite our consciousness with the omniscience of God, that's all. So, going on now a little further, tonight we are taking up the power of the soul, or how the soul acts, or how the soul knows. How are you going to know the presence of God within? You will know it through the power of the soul consciousness, or you will know it through the intuition of the soul. Faith comes when you know through intuition. Ordinarily, we cannot know the presence of God by the outward faculties of the senses, mind, and intellect, because God is not known by reason. Therefore, it behooves us to know something about this intuition of the soul, because only through that can we perceive our oneness with God. It is very important to know that. And so, the soul sees through the intuition in a perfect way. Sometimes we look out and we see things, but if our vision isn't what it should be, we will see them in a blurred way. Same with hearing. Same with feeling. Same with the five senses. But through the intuition of the soul, you see through the sight, through the hearing, through those same things in a perfect way. Not in an imperfect way like you see in use of ordinary senses, or hear, or taste, or smell. You see completely. Well, you say, how is that? Well, in the dream, don't sometimes you see and taste and smell things? So, in the state of deep sleep, of which we have spoken lately, in the state of deep sleep, if you can remain conscious through it, you will see and hear and feel perfectly through the intuition of the soul. But that vibration is quite different from the ordinary vibration whereby we see ordinarily and hear and taste and smell. It is full and complete. Just to take the dream, which is not through soul consciousness, it's through the subconscious mind. You know you can see and completely in the dream, taste and smell and so forth. Therefore, through the soul's power, its intuitive power, the power by which God sees and knows all things, you can see and taste, smell, and all those things. In other words, you can know the presence of God only through the intuition of the soul. Just like you see me standing here and I see you there. So in God's presence, you will see Him, you will feel His presence, you will hear His vibration in a better way than as if you were seeing and hearing and feeling with ordinary senses. So remember, the presence of God isn't just a vague thing. It's a real presence. And that's what we read in the Bible about the Word, because the Word is God. Now, if you can meditate and contact that Word of God, which the techniques of self-realization give you, if you do that, the presence of God will be real and tangible to you, more so than outward senses, mind, and intellect. Understand that the presence of God must be real, must be tangible. Then, in His presence, as we spoke the last time, I believe, then when you pray, you know He hears you. I know you hear me, because we're in the presence of one another. Why not get in God's presence? And then when you ask Him, as a loving Father which He is, you know He hears you, and if you know it enough, you won't pray in His presence, because He knows what you need. That's why Master said, one of the greatest prayers, the only one we need, really, Father, reveal Thyself. Reveal Thyself. If you have the presence of God, you won't need to pray, because He is the sum and substance of all creation and each and every one of us and all things. So I think Kriya Yoga is the highest yoga, but yoga needs to be practiced without question of a doubt. Now, intuition, just like in your dream, you see in front, behind, above, beneath, all at the same time. It's a little different than this outward use of the senses. But through intuition, you see completely, above, beneath, on the left and on the right, at one time. It is a complete sense. It is the sixth sense. The five we are familiar with, but this sixth sense is the power of God's presence within you, or your own soul, and that power is called intuition. Now, in this intuition, remember, there is the universal power of sight, plus the universal power of feeling. In your dream, you exercise it somewhat. For instance, as you dream, you see in front, behind, above, beneath, and you feel these things together, simultaneously. So in the state of deep sleep, or when you meditate deeply, contact that state of deep sleep, you will see through the universal power of sight, and you will feel through the universal power of sight the same which God sees and feels through, because you are that. That's the true single eye. That's the real single eye of God. And intuition is the power of the soul, or the single eye of God within you. You see, it sees and hears and feels in a little different way. It's complete in itself. Just like when you dream. You know what goes on, you're part of the dream, but it happens simultaneously, because it's your own light which is producing the dream through the subconscious films. So with God's great creation, that it is His light which has projected the whole thing, and His omnipresent feeling is through the whole thing. So you will see, feel the same way. Remember, the single eye is not just the eye at this point. This is the instrument of the single eye. It's the instrument. It is called the single eye, I know. but it is because of the universal power of God within it to see in front, behind, above, beneath, and his feeling. That is the real single eye. And that's the single eye when you are able to penetrate the spiritual eye at this point. It is through that power of intuition that you will see above, beneath, in front, behind, all pervading. Meditate deeply, keep at it. You'll pass through it and you'll see these things are true. And so this is the true single eye of God within us, and that's the presence of God within us. Now, if we're in that presence, we will feel not like praying at all. We will feel like doing what? Loving God, that's all. That's all the prayer we need, is to love God. God is love. If you love him, really, you won't ask him for anything. All you want is his love, and all he wants is your love. The other will take care of itself. But until that point is reached, we sometimes do have to pray, but we must get into his presence first. But gradually, as the separation is removed that exists by delusion, and we feel apart from him, as that is removed, and we feel one with him, there's no need of really praying. These are important things to remember. Practice of yoga will take you to the presence of God. And God's grace will help you to unite with his omnipresence, so that you can say, as the great saints have said, I and my Father are one. I am he, I am he. Blessed Spirit, I am he. So these things are real. Yoga is really necessary. Not just the superficial yoga of bodily exercises and those things. Those are good because the life force is a part of God's cosmic energy. And when you exercise and feel the muscle come up, it's because God's cosmic energy goes in there. And when you take that same cosmic energy in your meditation and take it out of the body consciousness and put it at this point, it's the same cosmic energy of God, plus your will, and your will is God's will. So all of the techniques of self-realization given by our Master, who realized his oneness with God, in fact, all great saints are one in the omniscience of God. If you practice those things, you too will be able to do the things the saints do. We are all children of God made in his image. Let us not forget that. And so the organ of intuition is that place. It's difficult to place it. You cannot place it. No more than you can place God any one place. But we do know, as Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy body will be filled with light, the light of spirit. And so the place in the physical body, which has front and back, above, beneath, and this point here between the eyebrows at this point, is the organ where your intuition operates. That's the place we have to go back through to return home and reascend once more to spirit. That's the eye of which Jesus spoke in Matthew. And this is the seat, as I have often said, of spiritual vision. You will see it. If you meditate and keep your attention here and elevate your consciousness from bodily attachment to the senses and the different parts of the body, if you keep it there, you will see through the intuition of the soul. Gradually you'll be able to do that. And that's the power by which you will return home to God. It will not be by these eyes, or this hearing, or this taste and smell and touch, but the touch of the soul through its intuitive power. And the way to contact it is at this point. Yoga practice will take you to that spiritual eye. And gradually, by the grace of God, you can penetrate it. Expand your consciousness. That's why I sang I am the bubble, make me the sea. You have to expand your consciousness from thinking you are this little bubble of ego to the great ocean of God's presence. And you will do it through the intuition of the soul at the single eye at this point. And so the organ of intuition is commonly known as the spiritual eye. It is called many other things. The single eye, the inner eye, the star of the east, the dove descending from heaven. It is called that because the single eye is spherical, and the outer vibrating ring of vibrating energy corresponds to the vibratory creation, the beam which comes into us. The dark center corresponds to God's consciousness in that vibratory creation. And the little star in the center corresponds to the epitome of God the Father, or cosmic consciousness. That's why we're made in the image of God. And that's why we can return home to Him. If it were not so, we could not return home to Him. By being one with the outer vibrating ring, sometimes seen as light, sometimes as gold, by many in this room, by being one with that, you can feel God in all creation, or know the Christ consciousness, which is the dark center. That vibration is so high it is above color. Now, when you concentrate and penetrate through the little star in the dark center, then you can merge and be one with, through the grace of God, cosmic consciousness, or God the Father. Larry Marshall said, penetrate the little star in the center of the spherical eye and know the infinite kingdom within. That's what yoga helps you to do. Takes you to that point. Yoga is very necessary to know the presence of God. Now, worldly knowledge is gained by the five senses of which we have spoken, but inner or astral or causal knowledge, or taken as a whole spiritual knowledge, is gained not through these five senses, but through the intuition of the soul at the spiritual eye, at the Christ center. Now, at this point, it is described in the Hindu philosophy as a point whereby your consciousness is the center of a circle whose circumference is eternal. Now, why is that? Because every time you contact the ocean of the Spirit, you are in contact with the whole ocean. Every time when you are still enough, every time your mind is still enough, so there's no vibration of the mind or thoughts or anything, then you are in contact with the ocean of God's presence, because every point is in contact with every other point. Just like even in radio, you press and make the spark at this point, and around the other side of the world it goes, almost instantaneously. That gives you a little idea of the spirit, the ocean of spirit. So at that rest point, when you are still, when there's no ripple in the ocean of your consciousness, or in the lake of the mind, as Master used to call it, then you are in contact with that great ocean of spirit. Then there's no end to what you can expand your consciousness to. Remember that point when you're fully alert at this point and there's no thought in your mind, no nothing. Just consciousness, pure, alerted at that point. That's the center of a great circle, the circumference of which is eternity. Now that's what you will have to strive for in your meditation. Because God is unlimited. His consciousness is unlimited, so is ours. Only we've bottled it up in this little body. Through karma, through attachment, through many things. We have to unbottle it, so to speak, and free it in the ocean of God's presence. And so the omniscience of God received through the intuition of the soul is complete. Complete. Complete in all faculties, which we enjoy now in a limited way in this earthly existence. In God's kingdom, it is complete, free, unending, boundless. Such is God's greatness. And that's His love. No wonder we should seek the love of God, nothing else. And all things shall be given unto us. As I pointed out, the spiritual eye is known in many ways as the star of the east, the eye of intuition, the spiritual eye, the single eye, the dove descending from heaven with its two wings and its mouth. The mouth is a little star in the center. The two wings are represented by the outer vibrating ring of energy in the dark center. But these things are misnomers. We have to have those things because here we are in this physical body. We have to have something we can lean against, something we can start to climb on. But the real single eye is what I have spoken and told you about, the universal power of sight and feeling, which is God himself. That's the single eye. All other things are derived from that. The power we have with our two eyes is taken from that power of God. So, just to point out the difference between the real single eye and the ordinary spoken of single eye at this point. Now, penetrating this eye of which we see at this point, which is a reflection of the medulla center, penetrating that eye, then we will get this true single eye, the universal power of sight. Those of you perhaps who've had the good fortune through God's grace to see through that single eye, you will see that there's a universal power of sight all around. You don't have to focus anything. That's God's power. And also there's a universal feeling, which, if you can just contact, you will hope you'll never have to leave, of which Jesus said, the peace that passeth all understanding. Such is God's love. That's God himself. So we have something within our grasp if we will but try and labor for it. Therefore, meditation, right meditation, is the effort that is the highest form of yoga, or meditation is the effort to penetrate the spiritual eye into the infinite kingdom of God within. That's our home. That's our home. Master once told me, he said, let your life be a spiritual example for others to follow. Two are one home of life, where all will meet, who live and do right. That is, who want God above all other things. And so, through the intuition of the soul, all aspects of cosmic consciousness can be realized. And cosmic consciousness is God the Father. And so we have something to think about in tonight's talk. And next time I will tell some more about the organ of intuition as I have this evening. Now for some references, just to show you that these things are not figments of imagination, but they are real and tangible and attainable for those who really want to know God. First, from Hindu philosophy. And I'll take it from Master's autobiography because it is the textbook of Hindu philosophy which we use. On page 41, at the bottom of the page, referring to the single eye, the seat of the single or spiritual eye, the seat, not the eye itself, the seat is called the spiritual eye here. The seat of the single or spiritual eye. At death, the consciousness of man is usually drawn to this holy spot. Even you don't have to wait till somebody dies. Take a young person, child, infant, and when they're asleep, gently raise the eye and you'll see they're pointed right there because their consciousness is returned to its soul, its place from which it comes. At death, the consciousness of man is usually drawn to this holy spot, accounting for the upraised eyes found in the dead. And also, I pointed to you about Larry Marsha, who said that yoga will take you into the presence of God, but it must be followed by full surrender to God. Then you will know the single eye, the universal power of sight, plus the universal power of feeling. It was because Larry Marsha labored so much that he was able to be in that constant. And so if we can do that, we can not only see the different saints, our saints, or any of the great ones who were liberated, but we can be them. So Larry Marsh has said, because all things come from the omniscience of God, and all things are registered there. Your life is registered there, so is mine. But we must know it consciously, not just take Scripture's word for it. And so these are great truths which we are discussing. Now, in the Bible, one quotation you know of in Matthew about if thine eye be single, thy body will be filled with light. That one you are familiar with. Then also we have in Ezekiel, the 43rd chapter, first 2 verses. Afterward he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looketh toward the east. That's the single eye at this point, spoken of in our own Scriptures. And what happened there? Behold, the glory of God came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the noise of many waters, and the earth shined in his glory. So, through the practice of yoga, you will take your consciousness to this point. And there, that's the point, the east point. And there you will see the glory of God if you keep at it. And how will you know you're in the right place? Because you will hear the sound of the cosmic sound of Om as the sound of many waters, or the great trumpet sound. That's the proof that you are on the right track. And if you become one with that sound, you will know the presence of God. He who knows Om, that means merges in it, knows God, or Brahma. So there's no doubt, there's no question, but it is the right way to go. We must do it. And also from the autobiography once more, in reference to this same passage of the Scripture about the single eye, Master has put it in his book, I see. Then he concludes, through the divine eye in the forehead, the east, the yogi sails his consciousness into omnipresence, hearing the word or Om, the divine sound of many waters or vibrations, which is the sole reality of creation. Everything comes from that one vibration. That's why I spoke of it before we sang. Everything we do in this life must be pointed or slanted, so to speak, toward merging in that holy vibration, because that's God's presence, just as it says in the Hindu philosophy. The yogi sails his consciousness into omnipresence, hearing the word or Om, the divine sound of many waters or vibrations, which is the sole reality of creation. Even your body, my body, everything we can think of or see comes from that one vibration. That's why it says in St. John, and the Word was God. Not only just a vibration, which is his movement, but his consciousness is in there too. And in Ezekiel, the 44th chapter, referring to this single eye, he brought me back by the gate, the outward sanctuary which looketh toward the east, the outward sanctuary. This is the outward place where you contact the inner single eye of God's omnipresence. And in the 3rd verse, it is for the prince. We are all princes. We're not just sinners. We shouldn't think ourselves that. We are God's children. Never mind what we've done. We've all done plenty. Who cares? Right now is what counts. And so it says, it is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord. He shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate. This is the porch. The gate is the universal single eye of God's presence. And then it concludes, and he shall go out by the way of the same. You eat bread means you feel God's love, that's all. Putting it in simple terms. feeling that that's the greatest food you can get. That's the greatest manna. And having been recharged in God's presence, so to speak, we go out by that gate. Because we return to this realm of outward consciousness. But the wonderful thing is that we are princes and are entitled to be in with God's love, one with his love, if we will just but do it and demand it with loving attention toward God. And so much reference about the Bible. One or two things that I put down for you. Faith is the intuition that photographs unseen things. You cannot see the great omnipresence of God, but when through the intuition of the soul you pass through the single eye, then faith will show you those things. Faith is the proof of God. Faith is the proof of God. Faith by itself is the will of God. Let us understand these eternal truths. Finally, from the Gita, one reference from the Gita, substantiating about this single eye as being the organ of intuition. In the 8th discourse, 9th and 10th line, he who thinketh upon the ancient, the omniscient, the all-ruler, minuter than the minute, the support of all, a form unimagined,